Chapter 2 of An English Girl's First Impressions of Burma. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Carol Fullerton Samsell at clonesoflangston.com. An English Girl's First Impressions of Burma by Beth Ellis. Chapter 2, Rangoon. Quote of unknown origin. "Oh, the land of pagodas and paddy fields green is Burma, dear Burma, you know." This is not a book on Burma, but an account of my impressions of Burma. Therefore, for all matters concerning which I have no original impressions, such as its history, its public buildings, the scenery, the life and condition of the natives, its resources, and its future, I refer both the gentle and ungentle reader to the many books on the subject which have appeared during the past few years. My first and last impression of Rangoon was heat. Not ordinary, honest, hot heat, such as one meets with at Marseille or in the heart of the desert, wherever that may be. Not a stuffy heat such as one encounters in church, but a damp, clinging, unstable sort of heat, which makes one long for a bath, if it were not too much trouble to get into it. I remember in my youth placing one of my sister's wax dolls, mine were all wooden as I was of a destructive nature, to sit before the fire one cold winter's day. I remember Dolly was somewhat disfigured ever afterwards. The remembrance of that doll haunted me during my stay in Rangoon. I felt I could deeply sympathize with and thoroughly understand her feelings on that occasion. And for the first 2 or 3 hours, remembering the effect the heat had upon her appearance, I found myself frequently feeling my features to discover whether they still retained their original form and beauty. But after a few hours I became resigned. All I desired was to melt away quickly and quietly and have done with it. At first I looked upon the punkah as a nuisance. Its unceasing movement irritated me. It ruffled my hair, and I invariably bumped my head against it on rising. But after enduring one long punkah-less half hour, I came to look on it as the one thing that made life bearable, and the punkah-wallah as the greatest benefactor of mankind. In the early mornings and evenings I became hardly cooler, but what might be described as firmer, and it was at these times that the wonderful sights of Rangoon were displayed to my admiring gaze. I saw the celebrated Shwe Dagon Pagoda, with its magnificent towering golden dome, surmounted by the beautiful golden jewelled tea, the innumerable shrines, images, cupolas, and pagodas at its base, the curious mixture of tawdry decorations and wonderful wood carvings everywhere visible, and the exquisite blending and intermingling of colours in the bright dresses of the natives, who crowd daily to offer their gifts at this most holy shrine. It is quite futile to attempt description of such a place. Words cannot depict form and colour satisfactorily, least of all convey to those who have not themselves beheld it a conception of the imposing beauty of this world-famed pagoda. The Burmese are a most devout people. The great flight of steps leading to the pagoda is worn by the tread of many feet, and every day the place is crowded with worshippers. They begin young. I saw one wee baby, scarcely more than a year old, brought by his father to learn to make his offering at the shrine of the Buddha. The father, with difficulty, balanced the little fellow in a kneeling position before a shrine, with the tiny brown hands raised in a supplicating attitude, and then retired a few steps to watch. Instantly the baby overbalanced and toppled forward on its face. He was picked up and placed in his former position, only to tumble down again when left. This performance was repeated about 5 times. The father never seemed to notice the humour of the situation. The baby certainly did not. One of the most interesting sights of Rangoon is that of the elephants. Ostensibly their work is to pile timber ready for embarkation on the river, but evidently they consider that they exist and work in order to be admired by all who pay them a visit, and well they deserve admiration. They go about their duties in a stately, leisurely manner, lifting the logs with trunk, tusks, and forefeet, piling them up with a push here, a pull there, and then marching to the end of the pile and contemplating the result with their heads on one side, to see if all are straight and firm. And they do all in such a stately royal manner that they give an air of dignity to their menial work, and one comes away with the feeling that to pile teak side by side with an elephant would be an honour worth living for. During my peregrinations round the town, I was taken to see the home of the Indian civilian, a huge imposing building with such an air of awe-inspiring importance about every stick and stone, that none, save those initiated into the secrets of the place, may enter without feeling deeply honoured by the permission to do so. Even a Bombay Burman could hardly approach without losing some of his natural hardihood. Elephant moving timber. It may have been the awe with which this building inspired me. It may have been my visit to the pagoda, with its air of mysticism and unknown possibilities. But when I retired to my large, dimly lighted bedroom after my first day's wanderings in Rangoon, my natural courage forsook me, and I became the prey to a fit of appalling terrors. All the ghostly stories I had ever heard of the spiritualism of the East, of the mystic powers of thugs, vampires, and other unpleasant beings, returned to my mind. For some time I could not sleep, and when at last I did sink into an uneasy doze, I was haunted by nightmares of ghostly apparitions, and powerful and revengeful images of Gautama. Suddenly I awoke with the feeling that something, I knew not what, had roused me from my uneasy slumber. And then, as I lay trembling and listening, out of the darkness came a voice, weird, uncanny, which exclaimed in solemn tones the mystic word "Tuktu." What could it be? Was I one destined to learn deep secrets of the mystic world? Had the spirit, if spirit it were, some great truth to make known to me? If so, what a pity it did not speak English. "Tuktu," remarked the voice again, this time rather impatiently. I racked my brains to think of a possible meaning for this mysterious word, but all in vain. I could understand nothing. "Tuktu, Tuktu, Tuktu," it continued. And then out of the darkness came another voice, an angry English voice, loud in its righteous indignation, the voice of my host. "Shut up, you beast," he cried, and perhaps he added one or two more words suited to the occasion. I lay down and tried to pretend that I had not been frightened, and in doing so fell asleep. I was introduced to the Tuktu next day, but did not consider him a pleasant acquaintance. He is a lizard about a foot long, with a large red mouth and a long wriggling tail. He reminded me of a baby alligator. He dwells on the inner walls of the houses, and his presence in a house is supposed to bring good luck. But his tiresome habit of tuktuing in a most human voice at all hours of the day or night make him rather unpopular. We chased him down the wall with a long Shan spear and caught him in a towel, but he looked so pugnacious that we did not detain him from his business. Of course the most important element of life in Rangoon, in fact in all Burma, is the gymkhana. Apparently the European population in Rangoon exists solely in order to go to the gymkhana. It attracts like a magnet. People may not intend to go there when they set out, but no matter how far afield they go, sooner or later in the evening they are bound to appear at the gymkhana. If they did not go there in the daytime, they would inevitably walk there in their sleep. This renowned gymkhana is situate in the hairpin road, and is a large, open, much verandahed, wooden building. Of the lower story, sacred to the male sex, I caught only a hurried glimpse in passing, and the impression left on my mind was a confusion of long men reclining in long chairs with long drinks. On my first visit to the upper regions I fancied myself in a private lunatic asylum, for there, in a large room built for the purpose, were numbers of men and women, to all other appearances perfectly sane, waltzing round and round to the inspiriting music of the military band, dancing in ordinary afternoon attire, not languidly but vigorously and enthusiastically, and that in a temperature such as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego never dreamed of. But I soon discovered that there was method in this madness, for the heat, when dancing, was so unspeakably awful that to sit still seemed quite cool in contrast, and it was worth the sufferings of the dance to feel cool afterwards, if only in imagination. In another room of the gymkhana, the ladies assemble to read their favourite magazines, or to glower from afar upon the early birds who have already appropriated them. And here I must pause to say a word in deprecation of the accusations of gossip and scandal, which are so frequently launched against the Anglo-Indian ladies. Not that I would for the world deny the existence of scandal, but what I wish to emphasize that the Anglo-Indians, at least those of the female sex, do not invent or repeat scandalous stories from pure love of the thing, nor from any desire to injure the characters of their neighbours. They are forced to do so by circumstances. For example, Mrs. A arrives early at the gymkhana, appropriates the newly arrived number of the Gentlewoman, and seating herself comfortably in a good light, sets to work to read the paper from beginning to end. But soon Mrs. B appears on the scene, and alas, Mrs. B has also come to the gymkhana with the intention of reading from beginning to end the newly arrived number of the Gentlewoman. And being human, Mrs. B, on finding her favourite paper already appropriated, is filled with a distaste for all other papers, and a consuming desire to read the Gentlewoman and the Gentlewoman only. If she cannot procure the paper right speedily, life holds no more happiness for her. But alas, Mrs. A shows no intention of relinquishing her possession of the paper for many hours. In vain does Mrs. B spread punch, graphic, or sketch temptingly before Mrs. A's abstracted eyes, but she is not to be influenced by honest means. Then Mrs. B has only one course left to her, and adopts it. First she seeks and obtains an assistant to the scheme, Mrs. C. The two ladies then draw near Mrs. A, who tightens her hold on the paper as they approach, and seat themselves on either side of their victim. Mrs. C, assuming an expression of sweet innocence, entirely disguising the craft of her intentions, pretends to be deeply interested in last week's Gazette, hoping thereby to demonstrate her lack of interest in fashion papers. Mrs. B entices Mrs. A into conversation. After a few desultory remarks, during which the aggressor still clings her prey, Mrs. B, throwing a warning glance at Mrs. C to prepare her, says in a voice fraught with deep mystery, "Were you not astonished to hear of so-and-so's engagement last week?" No, Mrs. A was not particularly astonished. But surely Mrs. A had heard that strange story about so-and-so's behavior towards somebody else. Curious, Mrs. A had not heard of it. Of course Mrs. B would not mention it to anyone else, but Mrs. A, as everyone knows, can be trusted, and it really was so strange. Then, calling to her aid all her powers of imagination, Mrs. B proceeds to relate some astounding invention concerning so-and-so. Gradually, as she becomes more interested in the recital, Mrs. A's fingers relax their hold on the precious paper, and at last it is dropped forgotten on the table. Now it is Mrs. C's turn. In the most careless manner she draws the Gentlewoman slowly towards her, until it is out of reach of Mrs. A, when she snatches it up eagerly and retires to another table, where she is soon joined by the triumphant Mrs. B. Then poor Mrs. A, deprived of her newspaper, just needs seek another one. But alas, they are all in use. Nothing remains for her to do but to imitate Mrs. B's conduct and attract Mrs. D's attention from the paper she is reading, by repeating to her the story she has just heard, adding whatever new details might appear to her most likely to arouse Mrs. D's interest. And so the snowball grows. Thus it will be clear to all that the accusations are unfair, seeing that the gossip indulged in by the ladies at the gymkhana is merely the outcome of circumstances, inventions being notoriously the children of necessity. It is obvious that were each lady in Burma provided with every magazine and paper that her heart could desire, gossip would speedily cease to exist in the ladies' clubs. The most extraordinary vehicle that ever existed is the Rangoon Tikagari. For inconvenience, discomfort, and danger, it has never been surpassed. It has been excellently described as a wooden packing case on wheels. I suppose it is a distant and unfashionable relation to the modern four-wheeler, with modern shutters in place of windows, very narrow, noisy, and uncomfortable. It is usually drawn by a long-tailed, ungroomed, and brainless Burman pony, and is driven by one of the most extraordinary race of men that ever existed. The Gariwala's appearance, but it is scarce meet to describe his appearance to the gentle reader. We will say his appearance is unusual. His mind and character have gained him his well-earned right to be counted among the eccentricities of the age. He is sublime in his utter indifference to the world at large, in the cheerful manner in which he will drive through, into, or over anything he happens to meet. But his most noted characteristic is utter indifference to the wishes of his fare. I have often wondered what are the secret workings of the Gharry Wallah's mind. He cannot imagine, no man, intelligent or otherwise, could imagine, that a human being drives in a gharry for the pure enjoyment of the thing. And yet he never seems to consider that his fare may desire to go to any particular destination. 'Tis vain to explain at great length and with many forcible gestures where one wishes to go. He hears, but he heeds it not. The instant one enters the vehicle, he begins to drive at a great rate in whatever direction first comes into his mind. He continues to drive in that direction until stopped, when he cheerfully turns round and drives another way, any way but the right one. No one has yet discovered where he would eventually drive to. Many have had the curiosity, but none the fortitude to undertake original research into the matter. It is presumed that, unless stopped, he would drive straight on till he died of starvation. Occasionally, by a judicious waving of umbrellas, it may be possible to direct his course, but that only in the case of a very young driver. I have sometimes wondered whether perchance the pony may be the sinner, and the driver merely an innocent and unwilling accomplice. I cannot tell, but this I can say: if you crave for danger, if you seek penance, drive in a tikka gharry. But if you desire to reach any particular destination in this century, don't. With the exception of a few leisure hours spent at the Gymkhana, the ladies of Rangoon devote their time and energy to writing chits. At first I was filled with a great wonder as to what might be the nature of these mysterious chits. I would be sitting peacefully, talking with my hostess in the morning, when suddenly a look of supreme unrest and anxiety comes over her face. "Excuse me a moment," she exclaims, "I must just go and write a chit." She then hastens to her writing table, rapidly scribbles a few words, gives the paper to a servant, and then returns to me with an expression of relief and contentment. But scarce 5 minutes have elapsed ere the look of anxiety again returns. Again she writes a chit, and again becomes relieved and cheerful, and so on throughout the day. And this, I discovered, was the case with nearly every European lady in the country. I suppose it must be some malady engendered by the climate, only to be relieved by the incessant inditing of chits. I myself never suffered from the ailment, but should doubtless have fallen a victim had I remained longer in the country. The contents and destination of these chits seem to be of little or no importance. So long as notes be written and dispatched at intervals of 10 minutes or so during the day, that is sufficient. What finally becomes of these chits I cannot pretend to say. Whether they are merely taken away and burnt, or whether they have some place in the scheme of creation, I never discovered. Nor do I know whether the male population suffers from the same malady. Does the Indian civilian, seated in his luxurious chamber in that awe-inspiring building of his, does he too spend his life in writing chits? Does the Bombay Burman in some far-off jungle, alone with nature undisturbed, does he too sit down neath the shade of the feathery bamboo or the all-embracing peepul tree, and write and dispatch chits to imaginary people, in imaginary houses, in an imaginary town? I know not. It is futile to speculate further upon the matter. The mystery of chit writing is too deep for me. I would gladly have remained longer in Rangoon, but it might not be. Mine was no mere visit of pleasure. I had travelled to Burma in search of adventure, such as is scarcely to be met with in the garden party, dinner party, and dance life of Rangoon. And so, one hot afternoon, with anxious beating heart, I said goodbye to security and civilization and set forth on my journey to Mandalay. End of chapter 2.